What is the price of integrity? For a young waitress drowning in debt, it was the weight of a billionaire's wallet in her hands. A wallet she returned without a second glance. She asked for nothing, expected nothing, but her simple act of honesty didn't go unnoticed. It triggered a chain of events that would plunge her into a world of unimaginable wealth, dangerous family secrets, and corporate warfare. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how one good deed became the key that unlocked a gilded cage, and how the woman who held that key had to fight for her life against the very man who gave it to her. What happens when a black card is not a gift, but a test? Stay tuned. The smell of stale coffee and fried onions was the perfume of Ilara's life. It clung to her cheap polyester uniform, settled in her hair, and lingered on her skin long after her shift ended at the daily grind. A diner that was anything but glamorous. At 24, her dreams of being a graphic designer were buried under a mountain of debt, each bill a tombstone for a future she could no longer see. The most pressing debt was not her own, but her younger sister's. Lily, with her bright, innocent eyes and a heart that beat to a fragile, failing rhythm, was the sun in Ilara's universe. And the cost of keeping that sun from setting was astronomical. The diner was a blur of faces' orders and the clatter of ceramic on Formica. Ilara moved through it like a ghost, her smile practiced her feet aching. It was a Tuesday, the kind of dreary, rain-slicked evening in the city that made people either morose or demanding. Tonight she had both. Then he walked in. He didn't belong. It was as obvious as a diamond in a dustbin. While the diner's usual patrons were worn-down office workers and tired truckers, this man was cut from a different cloth, a material so fine it seemed to repel the diner's greasy atmosphere. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, a silver watch that glinted under the flickering fluorescent lights, and an air of quiet, formidable power. He wasn't handsome in a movie star way. His face was all sharp angles and intelligent, discerning eyes that seemed to analyze everything and everyone. He looked to be in his late 30s, and he carried himself with the kind of weary authority that comes from commanding boardrooms and crushing competitors. He chose a booth in the corner, sliding onto the cracked vinyl seat with a grace that seemed out of place. He didn't look at the menu. "Just a black coffee," he said when Ilara approached, his voice a low baritone that cut through the diner's noise. "Coming right up," she chirped, her customer service smile firmly in place. She brought him the coffee, her hand steady, despite the unnerving intensity of his gaze. He was on his phone, speaking in clipped, decisive tones. Words like acquisition, hostile, and liquidate floated over to her. He was a shark, and this little diner was his temporary, baffling tide pool. She refilled his cup twice, and each time he gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. After an hour, a sleek black car, a Bentley Mulsanne, pulled up outside its engine, a low, predatory purr. The man stood up, placing a crisp $100 bill on the table, a tip that was more than her wages for the entire day. Her heart leaped a brief, frantic flutter of relief. This would cover Lily's prescription refill. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed again. Distracted, he answered it, his back to her. "Vance, what is it now? I told you to handle it." He strode out of the door, disappearing into the opulent interior of the Bentley. It was only then, as she went to clear the table, her eyes still fixed on the $100 bill, that she saw it. Lying partially under the table, almost hidden against the dark floor, was a wallet. It wasn't just any wallet. It was thick, made of rich, dark brown leather that was worn to a soft patina. It looked heavy. It looked important. Her breath caught. Her first instinct was to call out, to run after him. But the Bentley was already pulling away, merging silently into the city traffic. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. It was heavy, heavier than a wallet had any right to be. The leather was warm. Her co-worker, a jaded woman named Maria, sidled up to her. "What did Mr. Moneybags leave you?" Maria asked, eyeing the $100 bill. Then her eyes landed on the wallet in Ilara's hand. Her eyebrows shot up. "Whoa. Jackpot. Open it. I bet there's thousands in there." The thought was a venomous snake slithering into Ilara's mind. Thousands. What could she do with thousands? It wasn't just the prescription. It was the overdue consultation with the specialist at St. Jude's Medical Center. The one they said was Lily's best hope. It was the rent that was 2 weeks late. It was the suffocating pressure on her chest finally easing. Her thumb brushed against the clasp. It would be so easy, just a peek. No one would know. He was gone. A man with a Bentley and a $100 tip probably wouldn't even miss the cash. He could cancel the cards. She could feel Maria's expectant gaze on her. She saw the desperation reflected in her co-worker's eyes, a mirror of her own. This was the moment. The crossroads. The choice between who she was and who her circumstances were forcing her to be. She thought of Lily. She thought of her sister's trusting smile, of the stories she would read to her at night about brave knights and honorable queens. What kind of story was this? The one where the heroine steals to save the day? No. With a resolve that surprised even herself, she snapped the wallet shut in her palm. "I can't," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Maria scoffed. "Are you crazy, Ilara? That's a winning lottery ticket. He's probably some tech billionaire from California. He won't even notice." "I'd notice," Ilara replied, more to herself than to Maria. "I have to try and return it." She looked inside only for a driver's license. The name on it was stark and simple, Julian Croft. The address was on the Upper East Side, in a building so prestigious she'd only ever seen it in magazines. There was a single business card tucked behind the license. It just said Croft Holdings, with a phone number. No title. He didn't need one. Ignoring Maria's protests, Ilara slipped the wallet into her apron pocket. The weight of it felt like a moral anchor. For the rest of her shift, she was acutely aware of it, a silent testament to the choice she had made. She didn't look at the cash. She didn't peek at the cards. She knew if she saw the amount, her resolve might crumble. That night, after a grueling shift, she took the subway to the most opulent part of the city. The doorman at the address on the license, a towering man in a crisp uniform, looked at her as if she were a piece of trash that had blown in off the street. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain. I need to see Mr. Julian Croft," she stammered, holding up the wallet. "He dropped this. I found it." The doorman's expression shifted slightly from contempt to professional caution. He took the wallet from her as if handling a contaminated object. "I see. Mr. Croft is not in, but I will ensure he receives this immediately. Thank you for your trouble." It was a dismissal. He didn't ask for her name or number. She was an anonymous, inconvenient Good Samaritan. As she turned and walked away from the gleaming marble lobby, a wave of foolishness washed over her. Maria was right. She was crazy. She had held the solution to her problems in her hand and had given it away for nothing. Not even a thank you. She went home to her tiny, cramped apartment. The smell of the diner finally replaced by the faint antiseptic scent of Lily's medication. Lily was asleep, her breathing a soft, shallow whisper in the quiet room. Elara sat by her bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, and felt a profound ache. She had done the right thing, but the right thing felt cold and empty. The next morning, she was late for her shift. She had overslept a deep, exhausted sleep, filled with anxious dreams of falling wallets and ringing cash registers. Rushing out of her apartment, she nearly tripped on something just outside her door. It was a small, sleek black envelope. There was no name, no stamp. It had been slipped under the door, her heart hammered against her ribs. With trembling fingers, she tore it open. Inside there was no letter, no explanation, just a single, impossibly elegant piece of plastic. It was matte, black, heavy, and cool to the touch. The name Julian Croft was embossed in subtle silver lettering. In the corner was the understated iconic logo of the American Express Centurion card. The black card. A card with no set spending limit, available by invitation only to the world's wealthiest individuals. A myth, a legend. And it was lying in her hand. Tucked beside it was a tiny folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. 5 words were written in sharp, decisive handwriting. For your honesty. A better investment. Elara stared at the card, then at her own shabby apartment door, then back at the card. This wasn't a thank you. This wasn't a reward. This felt like a test, a puzzle, or a trap. The $100 tip had felt like a blessing. This felt like a burden. A kingdom of unimaginable spending power had just been slipped under her door, and she had a terrifying feeling that it came with a price far higher than anything she could afford. The black card lay on Elara's small, wobbly kitchen table like a piece of polished night sky. It absorbed the light, reflecting nothing. For 3 days it sat there, a silent, omnipotent guest in her tiny apartment. Elara circled it as if it were a venomous creature ready to strike. Her every instinct screamed at her to get rid of it. This was a world she didn't belong in, a game with rules she couldn't possibly understand. Her first attempt to return it was a predictable failure. She went back to the imposing skyscraper, but the doorman from before, whose name she learned was Charles, stopped her before she even reached the revolving doors. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, his voice polite but unyielding. "This is a private residence. There is no public access. But I have something for Mr. Croft." She insisted, her voice small. "He gave it to me by mistake." Charles's gaze was impenetrable. "If Mr. Croft wishes to see you, he will contact you. I have my instructions. Have a good day." She was dismissed again, just as easily, just as thoroughly. She tried the business number next, her hands clammy as she dialed. She was routed through an automated system that was a labyrinth of corporate departments. When she finally reached a human, a crisp-voiced executive assistant, her request to speak to Julian Croft was met with a polite but firm wall. "And what is this in reference to?" The assistant asked, her tone implying that no reason Elara could provide would be sufficient. "It's a personal matter," Elara faltered. "Mr. Croft's personal matters are handled by his personal staff. To whom did you wish to be directed?" She didn't have a name. She didn't have a department. She had a black card and a 5-word note. She hung up, her face burning with frustration and shame. It was clear the card was not a mistake. It was a one-way gift. He had given it to her, but he had made himself utterly inaccessible. The power was hers to use, but the responsibility was hers alone. So the card sat, a dark promise, a temptation she fought every hour. She went to work, smiled at customers, cleaned up spills, and tried to forget that in her wallet, nestled between her library card and a $5 bill, was the financial equivalent of a nuclear weapon. Then on a Friday night, the fragile piece of her life shattered. She came home to find Lily pale and breathless, her hand pressed against her chest. A series of harsh, ragged coughs shook her small frame, and Alara's blood ran cold. The local clinic doctor, a kind but perpetually overworked man named Dr. Evans, had warned her this might happen. Lily's condition, a congenital heart defect, was entering a more aggressive phase. A frantic call to the 24-hour nursing hotline, a terrifying rush in a taxi to the St. Jude's emergency room, and hours in a sterile white waiting room followed. Finally, a cardiologist with tired eyes and a grim expression, Dr. Anya Sharma, sat down with her. "Her pulmonary hypertension is worsening." Dr. Sharma said, her voice gentle but direct. "The medication regimen we have her on is no longer enough. We need to run a series of advanced imaging tests, a cardiac MRI, a right heart catheterization, to see if she's a candidate for a new experimental treatment. It's her best option, Alara. Frankly, at this point, it may be her only option." Alara's world tilted on its axis. "Okay," she whispered, her throat tight. "Okay, let's do it. Whatever it takes." Dr. Sharma gave her a sympathetic look. "I've put the orders in. You'll need to speak with hospital administration to handle the financial pre-authorization. These tests are extensive." Extensive was a clinical, bloodless word for what came next. In the sterile, soulless office of hospital billing, a woman with severe glasses and a practiced air of indifference printed a cost estimate. She slid it across the desk without looking up. Alara picked it up. The number at the bottom made her physically recoil. $38,500. It wasn't a bill. It was a death sentence. It was a figure so impossibly large, it might as well have been written in a foreign language. Her insurance, a flimsy plan from the diner, would cover a pittance. The rest was on her. "We require a deposit of 50% to schedule the procedures," the administrator said, finally looking up from her computer, her eyes devoid of pity. Alara felt the air leave her lungs. $38,000. She didn't have $38 to spare. The room began to swim. She saw Lily's face, pale and trusting. She saw a future without her, a bleak, silent abyss. And then she saw the black card. It wasn't a conscious thought. It was a desperate, primal instinct. It was in her wallet, a solution, a terrible, monstrous, beautiful solution. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, painful drumbeat. The words on the note flashed in her mind. A better investment. Was this what he meant? Was this the test to see if she would use his unfathomable wealth to save a life? Or was she about to step into a trap of his making? She looked at the administrator's impassive face. She thought of Lily struggling to breathe in a hospital room upstairs. Her integrity, the pride she had felt in that moment in the diner, now felt like a foolish, selfish luxury. What was her honor worth if her sister died? With a hand that shook so violently she could barely grasp her wallet, she pulled out the card. It looked alien on the worn linoleum counter. I'll pay the whole thing," she heard herself say, her voice a reedy whisper. The administrator's eyes flickered to the card, and for the first time her professional indifference cracked. She took in the matte black finish, the silver name. Her eyebrows climbed her forehead. Without a word, she took the card and ran it through the machine. The silence in the room was deafening. Elara held her breath, expecting alarms to blare for security to descend and haul her away as a fraud. She felt like a thief, an imposter of the highest order. Then a quiet beep, a green light, approved. The administrator slid the card back to her, her movements now slow and deferential. Her entire demeanor had changed. The cold, bureaucratic drone was replaced by a woman who was suddenly eager to please. "Everything is in order, Ms." She squinted at the card. "My apologies. Everything is taken care of. Dr. Sharma will be notified immediately to proceed. We've scheduled the MRI for tomorrow morning. Is there anything else at all I can get for you?" "A coffee water." Elara could only shake her head, her mind reeling. She mumbled a thank you and stumbled out of the office, the receipt for $38,500 clutched in her hand. She hadn't just paid a bill. She had crossed a line. She had stepped out of her world and into his, and the ground beneath her feet felt treacherous and unstable. The relief that flooded her was mingled with a cold, terrifying dread. She had saved Lily for now, but she felt she had just sold something invaluable in return. High above the city in a steel and glass tower that bore his family's name, Julian Croft was not thinking about a waitress or a wallet. He was at war. His desk was covered in financial projections and legal documents. His cousin Marcus Vance sat opposite him, a picture of feigned concern. Marcus was everything. Julian was not smooth, where Julian was sharp. Charming, where Julian was reserved and consumed by a grasping ambition that Julian found distasteful. "The board is getting nervous, Julian," Marcus said, steepling his fingers. "This takeover of Sterling Gould is aggressive. If it fails—" "It won't fail," Julian said, his eyes not leaving the document he was reading. Just then his private phone, the one on his desk reserved for the most secure alerts, chimed softly. He glanced at the screen. It was an alert from Amex's Centurion service, a protocol he'd set up for any unusual activity on his accounts. Account Julian Croft, supplementary card. 002 transaction. 38,500 souls. Vendor St. Jude's Medical Center. Billing debt. Alert first-time use of supplementary card. Julian frowned. Supplementary card 002. He had only one supplementary card holder, his mother, and she was on a cruise in the Mediterranean. He zoomed in on the details. He had created that supplementary account 3 days ago. A ghost account linked to the card he'd had couriered to a small apartment in a decidedly unglamorous part of the city. He had expected her to use it. Perhaps for food, for rent. Something small, logical. Not a nearly $40,000 hospital bill. Marcus, ever the opportunist, leaned forward, catching the brief flicker of confusion on Julian's face. "Something wrong?" Julian locked the phone, his expression unreadable once more. "Nothing," he said. "Just a minor portfolio alert." But his mind was racing. St. Jude's Medical Center. He made a mental note to have his head of security, a discreet and ruthlessly efficient man named Arthur, look into it. Who was the patient? What was the charge for? He had given the girl a key, an investment in her character. He hadn't expected her to immediately try and drain the treasury. Or had he misjudged her completely? Was her honesty just a more clever long-term play for his money? The thought left a sour taste in his mouth. Marcus watched him, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips as soon as Julian looked away. He had seen the name on the screen. St. Jude's. He had already been suspicious of Julian's strange visit to a run-down diner and the subsequent highly classified instructions to his security team. A little digging had already given him a name, Elara. Now this. A waitress, a hospital, a secret credit card. Marcus Vance didn't see a minor portfolio alert. He saw a weapon, and he knew exactly how he was going to use it to bring his formidable cousin to his knees. Hope Elara discovered was a substance far more terrifying than despair. Despair was a familiar weight, a constant companion she knew how to carry. Hope was a fragile, fluttering bird she was terrified of crushing. The $38,000 transaction had been a miracle, a key turning in a lock she thought was rusted shut. Lily was immediately fast-tracked for her procedures. A team of specialists whose names Elara had only ever read on the hospital's website with a sense of distant awe were now speaking to her directly. They used words like promising prognosis and cutting edge. For the first time in years, the future was not a black wall, but a hazy, sunlit path. This newfound light, however, cast long and terrifying shadows. Elara became a ghost in her own life, haunted by the spectre of the black card. It lay dormant in a hidden pocket of her purse, yet its presence was a constant humming pressure against her ribs. She was acutely aware of its power, and this awareness bred a deep, gnawing paranoia. Every time a police siren wailed in the distance, her blood ran cold. Every official-looking envelope that arrived in her building's shared mailbox sent a jolt of pure panic through her. She felt like an actress on a massive stage, unaware of her lines, her role, or when the curtain would suddenly fall. She stopped eating properly, subsisting on instant noodles and toast, her appetite stolen by anxiety. The irony was grotesque. She possessed the power to dine at any Michelin-starred restaurant in the city, yet she was surviving on scraps, terrified to use the card for even a loaf of bread. It was a line she could not bring herself to cross again. The hospital bill had been a matter of life and death, an absolute necessity. Anything else felt like a transgression, a confirmation of the greed she was terrified of embodying. She was living in a gilded cage of her own making, too scared to touch the golden bars. Her relationship with Lily became a delicate performance. In the sterile, hopeful environment of the hospital room, Elara was the pillar of strength, her smile bright and unwavering. She read stories, played card games, and spoke of a future where Lily could run and play without fear. But the moment she stepped out of the room, her mask would crumble. The guilt of her secret was a physical weight. How could she celebrate this hope when it was built on a foundation of such a terrifying secret? Her ordeal was compounded by the growing hostility at work. Maria, her co-worker, had transitioned from sarcastic disbelief to a state of simmering, venomous resentment. The whispers started subtly. Then came the snide remarks, loud enough for Elara to hear. "Must be nice," Maria muttered one afternoon, as Elara clocked in, her voice dripping with insinuation. "Some of us have to work double shifts to pay the rent, others just find a sugar daddy." One evening, Maria cornered her by the dumpsters during their break. "Don't play dumb with me, Elara," she hissed, her face pinched with envy. "I saw that guy. I know he left you more than a tip. And now suddenly little Lily is getting the royal treatment at St. Jude's. You think I'm stupid." "It's not what you think," Elara said, her voice shaking. She couldn't explain. What could she say? A billionaire I met once slipped a limitless credit card under my door, after I returned his wallet. The truth was so outlandish it sounded like a pathetic lie. "Save it," Maria scoffed, taking a drag from her cigarette. "Just remember who your friends are when your rich boyfriend gets tired of you." The accusation stung, but it was the word boyfriend that truly horrified Elara. Maria hadn't just assumed greed. She had assumed intimacy, a sordid transaction of a different kind. Elara felt stained, her desperate act twisted into something ugly and cheap. She knew then that she was truly alone in this. Meanwhile, miles away in the sterile, air-conditioned world of corporate power, two vastly different investigations into her life were running in parallel, both set in motion by the same $38,500 transaction. The first was conducted by Arthur Vance Julian Crofts, inscrutable head of security. Arthur was a man who moved through the world with quiet efficiency, a ghost in the machine of Croft Holdings. He was ex-MI6, and his approach was one of surgical precision, stripping away narrative and emotion to find the bare, unvarnished facts. On Julian's terse command, "Find out everything about this charge about her." Arthur began his work. He didn't hire clumsy private eyes. He used proprietary data mining algorithms and his own high-level access to weave together the tapestry of Elara's life. He saw the mountain of debt, the years of struggling to keep up with Lily's escalating medical costs. He saw her spotless employment record, her lack of any criminal history, the humble digital footprint of a person with nothing to hide. It was a portrait of quiet desperation, not cunning ambition. The key, Arthur knew, would be the point of origin. He discreetly acquired the complete security footage from the daily grind, from the night in question. In his sound-proofed office, he watched the scene unfold on a large monitor. He saw Julian distracted and powerful. He saw the wallet drop. He watched Elara spot it, and he leaned closer, his analytical gaze missing nothing. He was an expert in non-verbal cues, and he saw it all: the initial flicker of shock, the immediate sharp intake of breath. He saw Maria approach her body language, aggressive and persuasive. He saw Elara's internal struggle play out on her face, the conflict in her eyes, the tightening of her jaw. Then came the crucial moment. Elara shook her head, a small, decisive gesture. She picked up the wallet, but her fingers never went near the opening. There was no hesitation, no furtive glance inside. It was the motion of someone handling a lost object, not a newfound treasure. She found the ID and immediately secured it. The facts were clear, aligning perfectly with the data he had collected. Arthur leaned back, satisfied. This was not a grifter. This was a decent person, pushed to the brink, who had, against all odds, chosen honor over opportunity. The subsequent use of the card was not an act of greed, but the logical, desperate act of someone who had been handed a lifeline while watching a loved one drown. He compiled his report for Julian, a concise, fact-based summary. He attached a high-resolution still from the video footage, a close-up of Elara's face in that moment of decision. The report concluded, "Subject Elara acted with integrity under duress." The subsequent financial event is assessed with high probability as an act of desperation related to a pre-existing family medical crisis. No evidence of malicious intent or long-term deception found. The second investigation was a far more sinister affair, a dark mirror to Arthur's pursuit of truth. It was orchestrated by Marcus Vance from his opulent office overlooking the city. Marcus didn't want facts. He wanted a narrative, a weapon. His own less scrupulous private investigator had initially come back with the same story of a hard-working, debt-ridden girl. It was useless to him. A noble waitress was not a lever he could use to pry his cousin from power. So if the dirt wouldn't present itself, he would manufacture it. His first target was the weakest link, Maria. He approached her not as a corporate titan, but as a sympathetic confidant. He found her at the diner, his expensive suit, a stark contrast to the greasy spoons decor. He listened patiently as she vented her frustrations, his handsome face a mask of concern. "It's an injustice," Marcus said, his voice a smooth, comforting balm on her raw envy. "You work so hard and she takes shortcuts. It's not right. Someone should hold her accountable." He didn't just offer money, he offered validation. He made Maria feel like a crusader for justice, not a paid liar. By the time he left, he had a signed, notarized affidavit in his briefcase. It was a masterpiece of fiction, detailing how Elara had bragged about finding the wallet, how she had counted thousands in cash, and had cynically plotted to hook the rich guy and bleed him dry. But that was only stage one. A false witness statement was not enough. He needed a paper trail. Late at night, using his executive credentials to navigate the labyrinthine accounting systems of Croft Holdings, Marcus began his true work of art. He initiated a series of small anonymous wire transfers from a discretionary fund he controlled, routing them through a complex web of shell accounts. The final destination was a third-party payment processor that, through a series of deliberately obscured links, could be tenuously tied to an account Elara had once used for a freelance design project years ago. It was brilliant, subtle, and utterly damning. To any auditor, it would look exactly like a series of hush-money payments. He was forging the bars of Elara's cage. Julian Croft stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, the glittering city spread beneath him. Arthur's report lay open on his desk. He stared at the photograph of Elara's face, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. It was the face of a person at a precipice, choosing the harder path. He felt a profound sense of annoyance. His little experiment, his investment, had been designed to confirm his bleak worldview, that everyone had a price, that integrity was a luxury few could afford. He had expected her to buy something frivolous to expose a crack in her character. He had wanted to be proven right. Instead, she had used his limitless power for something selfless, something essential. It was an outcome his cynical calculus had not accounted for, and it disturbed him. It suggested a variable he hadn't considered. It suggested he might have been wrong. Driven by a compulsion he refused to analyze, he decided he had to see her again to measure the person against the data. His visit to the diner was an impulse. When he walked in, the place fell silent. Elara, wiping down the counter, froze. The color drained from her face, and she looked at him with the terrified eyes of a cornered animal. He had come here for answers, but he saw now that his very presence was an accusation. He sat at the counter, the space between them crackling. "I heard about your sister," he said, his attempt at subtlety failing completely. Her head snapped up, pure panic in her eyes. How did you know?" "I have my ways," he replied, and instantly regretted the ominous cliché phrase. He was making it worse. "The card?" She blurted out, her words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. "I had to. I'll pay you back. Every single cent. I'll get a second job, a third. I'll work for the rest of my life. She needed," he saw it then, the raw, unvarnished truth, the sheer absurd earnestness of her promise to repay an unpayable debt. It was the final irrefutable piece of data. Arthur was right. He had thrown a grenade into this woman's life for his own amusement, and she had used its blast to shield someone she loved. The thought left a sour, unfamiliar taste in his mouth. Shame. "You don't have to pay me back," he said, his voice firmer than he intended. He stood up, left a 50 on the counter, and walked out. His mind a chaotic whirl of conflicting thoughts. Across the street, sitting in a parked car, a man with a long-lens camera took a series of rapid-fire photos. He texted his employer. Target made contact. Photos attached. Marcus Vance looked at the images on his phone. Julian Croft, the billionaire recluse in a grimy diner, speaking intently with a young waitress. This was it. This was the master stroke. His narrative was no longer about a simple extortion plot. It was now a story of a compromised CEO, his judgment dangerously clouded by an illicit, inappropriate affair with a common waitress, putting the entire Sterling Gould acquisition and the future of the company at risk. It was better, juicier, and far more likely to sway a board of conservative, risk-averse directors. His trap had been meticulously constructed. The false testimony, the forged financial trail, and now the photographic proof of a clandestine meeting. He picked up his secure line and dialed the lead director. "Helen," he said, his voice grave and laden with faux concern. "We have a problem. A grave one concerning Julian's fitness to lead. I'm calling an emergency board meeting. For the good of the company, you all need to be there." The trap was set, and tomorrow morning he would not only destroy his cousin, he would ensure that the innocent woman at the center of it all would be remembered as the siren who lured a titan to his doom. The morning air in the hospital was thick with the scent of antiseptic and a quiet, humming dread. For Ilara, sitting on a hard plastic chair beside Lily's bed, it was the calm at the center of her own personal hurricane. Outside this small, sterile room, the world was a chaotic storm of debt secrets and the terrifying enigma of Julian Croft. But in here, there was only Lily, her sister, looking impossibly small in a pale blue hospital gown, was asleep, her breathing soft and even, thanks to the preparatory medication. Today was the day. The procedure that the Black Card had purchased was hours away, a nexus point where all their hopes and fears converged. Ilara watched the gentle rise and fall of Lily's chest, her heart aching with a love so fierce it was almost painful. This was the only thing that mattered. She gently pushed a stray strand of hair from Lily's forehead, her touch feather light. She had spent the night in this uncomfortable chair, refusing to leave, wanting to be the first thing Lily saw when she woke up. In these quiet moments, the weight of the Black Card and the lie it represented felt heavier than ever. She had bought this chance, this hope, with a secret that felt like a betrayal. Just as a fragile sense of peace began to settle over her, her phone vibrated, a harsh intrusion into the quiet room. An unknown number. Her first instinct was to silence it, to let the outside world remain outside. But a prickle of unease, a cold premonition, made her answer. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Ms. Ilara." The voice was calm, deep, and unnervingly familiar. "My name is Arthur Vance. I am Mr. Croft's head of security. I apologize for the intrusion, particularly on a day like today. But I am afraid this is a matter of extreme and time-sensitive urgency." Panic, cold and immediate, seized her. Arthur. The name clicked into place. The security chief. Her blood ran cold. This was it. The bill was coming due. "What is it? What's wrong? Mr. Croft is under attack." Arthur stated, his voice devoid of drama, but laced with an undeniable gravity. "His position is being challenged in an emergency board meeting that is already underway. The challenge is predicated entirely on a false narrative constructed around you. Elara's mind struggled to process the words. Board meeting false narrative. Me, I don't understand. What does that have to do with me? Everything, I'm afraid, Arthur said patiently. His cousin Marcus Vance is using your sister's hospital bill and a series of fabricated evidences to paint a picture of extortion and corporate malfeasance. He is trying to remove Mr. Croft from his own company. The only way to counter a lie of this magnitude is with the truth, your truth. Mr. Croft needs your help. There is a car waiting for you at the hospital's main entrance. We must leave now. The room began to spin. Leave now. No! She gasped, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. I can't. My sister, her procedure is in a few hours. I have to be here when she wakes up. I promised. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Arthur spoke again, his voice was softer, yet more insistent. Ms. Elara, I understand. But please, you must believe me when I tell you that the future of your sister's care is directly linked to the outcome of this meeting. Marcus Vance is a ruthless man. If he succeeds, he will control the Croft Foundation. He will cut off all funding and undo everything Mr. Croft has put in place. The help your sister is receiving will vanish. Everything is at stake. Just then a friendly nurse entered the room. We're ready to take Lily down for prep now, Elara. You can walk with us. Lily's eyes fluttered open, drowsy but lucid enough to see the panic on her sister's face. Elara, is everything okay? Elara felt as if she was being torn in two. Looking at Lily's trusting face, then thinking of Arthur's terrifying words, she knew she had no choice. She had started this, however, unwittingly. She had to see it through. She forced a smile that felt like cracking glass, leaning down to kiss Lily's forehead. Everything is going to be perfect, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. You be brave for me. Okay, I have to take care of something very quickly, but I will be right here when you wake up. I swear it. She walked with the gurney as far as the elevator, holding Lily's hand until the doors slid shut, separating them. The promise she had just made echoed in her ears, a prayer and a vow. Then, turning her back on the one person she loved most in the world, she ran. The black sedan was exactly where Arthur had said it would be. The moment she slipped inside, it pulled smoothly into traffic. Arthur sat in the passenger seat, turning to face her. In the daylight, he was an imposing figure, his face sharp and intelligent, his eyes missing nothing. What is happening exactly? She asked, her voice trembling. Corporate warfare, Arthur said simply. He handed her a tablet. You need to see what you are walking into. On the screen was a scanned document, the affidavit signed by Maria. Elara read it, her blood turning to ice. The lies were breathtaking in their audacity, tales of her bragging, counting cash, cynically plotting. This is all lies. Maria made this up. I know, Arthur said calmly. He swiped the screen. A complex chart of financial transactions appeared, a web of arrows and account numbers that ultimately pointed to her. And this is a fraudulent paper trail Marcus created to make it look like Mr. Croft has been paying you off for months. It is designed to be irrefutable. But why? She stammered, feeling sick. Why would he do this? To take control of a $10 billion empire? Arthur answered, You are not the target, Ms. Elara. You are merely the weapon he has chosen to use. That is why you must speak. They can dispute documents. They can argue over figures. But the truth spoken plainly and honestly has a power all its own. The rest of the ride passed in a blur of terrifying silence. She felt like she was being led to her own execution. They swept into the underground garage of the Croft Holdings Tower and were whisked up a private elevator that opened directly onto the top floor. The hallway was hushed, carpeted in deep grey. They stood before a pair of monumental oak doors. From within she could hear a man's voice, raised in passionate, ringing tones. "This is it," Arthur set his hand on the handle. "Just tell them what happened, from the beginning. Hold nothing back." He pushed the doors open. The boardroom was a theatre of power. 20 feet of polished mahogany stretched across the room, surrounded by 12 grim-faced men and women who collectively controlled a significant portion of the city's wealth. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the tense air. At the far end of the table, Julian Croft sat alone, a statue carved from ice. His face was a mask of cold fury. His hands steepled before him. He was completely isolated. At the other end, Marcus Vance was in his element, pacing, performing, his voice filled with a perfect blend of outrage and concern. "A pattern of reckless endangerment to this company's reputation," Marcus boomed, pointing to a projection of his forged financial web. "This waitress, this Elara, is not some charity case. She is a predator. She has sunk her claws into him, and in his compromised state, Julian has been placating her with company funds, jeopardizing the Sterling Gould acquisition and everything we have worked for. He is a liability. I ask for a vote of no confidence. I ask you to protect this company from the man who is supposed to be leading it." The board members murmured, their faces a mixture of doubt and disappointment. Helen, the lead director, a formidable woman in her 60s, looked at Julian with cold appraisal. The poison was working. It was into this charged atmosphere that Elara stepped. The moment the doors opened, every sound in the room ceased. Every head turned. Marcus froze mid-sentence, his mouth agape. His shock was instantly replaced by a flash of triumphant, predatory glee. She had walked right into his trap. Her presence here would be seen as the ultimate proof of Julian's recklessness. Julian's eyes met Elara's across the vast expanse of the room. For a fraction of a second, his mask of composure cracked, and he gave her a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the encouragement she needed. Then he rose slowly to his feet, drawing the attention of the entire room. "Marcus," Julian said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that cut through the silence. "You have presented a compelling narrative, a work of fiction worthy of a prize." He looked at the board. "Now I suggest we deal in facts." He turned his gaze to Elara. "Ms. Elara, I apologize for bringing you into this arena, but these people have listened to the lies. Now I would ask them to listen to the truth. Would you please tell them what happened?" The weight of 12 pairs of powerful, analytical eyes fell upon her. She felt her throat close, her knees wanting to buckle. She was a waitress. These were kings and queens of commerce. Then she thought of Lily alone and brave in a hospital prep room, and a fire ignited in her chest. She walked forward until she stood at the edge of the great table. Her voice when she spoke was quiet, but it carried in the silent room. She told them everything. She spoke of the diner, of the bone-deep weariness of her mountain of debt. She described finding the wallet, the heft of it in her hand, the desperate temptation to look inside. She told them about Maria's urging. And then she spoke of Lily, her voice cracking with emotion as she described her sister's fragile health, the years of struggle, the crushing weight of the hospital bills. From her worn purse, she pulled out the black card. It looked alien and obscene as she placed it on the gleaming mahogany. "This is what he gave me," she said. Then she pulled out the crumpled hospital receipt. And this is what I used it for. One time, to save my sister. I was going to pay him back. I will pay him back. I never asked for anything else. Her story, simple, raw, and unadorned, hung in the air. It was a truth so plain, it was disarming. A few of the board members shifted uncomfortably, their gazes dropping to the table. Marcus, recovering, had let out a harsh laugh. A touching story, bravo. But a sob story doesn't negate the documented evidence of blackmail. You are correct, Marcus, Julian said coolly. It doesn't, which is why we must examine all the evidence. He gave a slight nod to Arthur, who stood by the door. The massive screen that had been displaying Marcus's fabrications flickered. It was replaced by grainy black and white security footage from the daily grind. The entire room watched in spellbound silence. They saw Elara find the wallet. They saw Maria lean in her gestures aggressive. And then in undeniable close-up, they saw Elara shake her head. Her face a mask of grim resolve, and place the wallet in her apron without ever opening it. A collective gasp went through the room. Helen, the lead director, shot a look of pure venom at Marcus. His key piece of evidence, the sworn affidavit, had just been vaporized. As for the so-called blackmail payments, Julian continued, his voice dropping to an icy calm. Arthur. The screen changed again. This time it displayed a series of internal Croft Holdings fund transfer authorizations. Each one corresponded to a payment in Marcus's web of lies. And at the bottom of each digital request, clearly displayed was the required executive sign-off. The signature was the same on every single one, Marcus Vance. Checkmate. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Marcus's ragged gasp. He hadn't uncovered a conspiracy. He had created one, and he had signed his name to every piece of it. The board turned on him as one. Their expressions were not of disappointment, but of cold reptilian fury. He had not only tried to oust their CEO, he had lied to them, manipulated them, and made them fools. This meeting is adjourned. Helen announced, her voice like chipping granite. Marcus, you will remain. Our security team will escort you to the legal department. You are finished at this company, and I suspect your legal troubles are just beginning. Marcus stared, his face ashen, his sophisticated mask shattered, revealing the panicked, grasping man beneath. The trap had sprung, and he was the one caught in its steel jaws. An hour later, the storm had passed. The boardroom was silent and empty, save for Julian and Elara. He walked over to where she stood by the window, looking down at a city that no longer seemed so terrifying. I am sorry, he said, and the words were not a perfunctory apology, but a profound admission heavy with a sincerity that startled her. I was wrong. This entire situation was born from my own arrogance. My cynical little test, my investment. It was a cruel game, and you were an unwilling player. You acted with an honor I had stopped believing was possible. He looked out the window. I have spent my life assuming the worst in people because it was easier than being disappointed. You proved me wrong, and for that I am in your debt. Lily, she whispered, her voice thick. Her care. Lily's care is taken care of, he said firmly. Permanently. I am establishing a private medical trust for her funded by my family's foundation. It will cover everything she ever needs for the rest of her life. No more bills, no more fear. He turned to face her, his gaze direct. You told me once you wanted to be a graphic designer. She nodded, her heart hammering. The Croft Foundation offers a number of educational endowments. I am creating a new one, the Elara Scholarship. Full tuition and living expenses to the best design school in the country. It comes with a paid internship at my company's marketing division, waiting for you whenever you are ready." Tears streamed down Elara's face, but for the first time they were not tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of overwhelming relief. "This isn't a gift, Elara," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "It's not a reward. It's an investment. A real one this time. Not in a cynical game, but in a person of integrity. A person I am proud to know." Looking at him, she saw not the terrifying billionaire or the cold corporate titan, but a man who had, in his own way, been as trapped in a gilded cage as she was. And in that moment she realized they had both in their own ways been set free. In the end, the greatest reward for Elara's integrity wasn't the money or the power that came with it. It was the opportunity she earned, the chance to build the life she'd always dreamed of, a life free from the desperation that had nearly consumed her. Her story is a powerful reminder that character is not defined by what we do when we have everything, but by the choices we make when we have nothing. It shows that even in a world that seems cold and cynical, a single act of honesty can echo in unexpected ways, clearing a path not to unearned riches, but to something far more valuable, a future you deserve. If Elara's journey from a grimy diner to the heights of her own potential resonated with you, please take a moment to support our channel. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder that good deeds matter, and most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for watching.